Okay, we're broadcasting.
Okay. All right. Good evening. The special meeting of the Board of Education on September 17th is now called to order. I just want to note for those listening at home that we had planned for our board members to meet in person tonight and use Zoom for the staff and the audience. However, there were technical challenges with the sound and the video for the staff and the audience, so we're back to Zoom for tonight. It provides more reliable sound and video, which is particularly important given the agenda we have tonight. All right, so let's move on. Have board members had a chance to review the agenda?
Yes.
Okay. I would like a motion to approve with the public comment section at the beginning of the meeting being moved to the section at the end of the meeting. The reason we know we have many public comments tonight, and we also have a presenter, our medical advisor, Dr. Mackin, and we want to be respectful of her time and allow her to present as early as possible. So is there a motion to approve the agenda, including moving the public comment section at the beginning of the meeting to the end?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. The consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right, thanks, Ruth. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstain.
All right. And you're abstaining, Glenn?
Yeah, I couldn't get to the minutes.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. No.
Okay, so we'll move on to section D, review and discuss school reopening. Before I turn it over to Dr. Smith, I'd like to preface the topic and the meeting and say a couple of things about what I think we can accomplish tonight. First, and as usual, thank you, Dr. Smith, and your extraordinary administrative team for your continued leadership during this pandemic. And thank you again, and especially, to all the teachers and support staff for their continued heroic and creative work, dedication, and deep commitment to students. We have come this far because of their tremendous efforts and professionalism. And thank you as well to the families for guiding and encouraging your students through this new learning landscape. We're going to be addressing some thorny issues tonight. Before we dive in, we should take a moment to realize there are many aspects to feel good about. While far from perfect and not all that we want it to be, the remote and the hybrid models have worked on several levels. Student-teacher relationships are being formed. Our technology tools and expertise have come a long, long way from last spring. We've implemented health and safety protocols successfully for the most part. The logistics around communication, schedules, lunch service, transportation, etc., are also running fairly smoothly. And our students are embarking on the curriculum. As a board, we take to heart, we understand, and we empathize with all the valid concerns and worries we have heard from parents and teachers. And we remind everyone that we try to adhere to the board goals we set in August, which include putting health and safety first, being guided by medical science and advice, supporting our teachers to the greatest extent possible, providing resources to the extent we can afford them, and communicating and engaging with families in the community. It's been said multiple times, we're in this together. As we address the real and painful challenges of students feeling discouraged, overwhelmed, and disengaged, even to the point of tears, of teachers feeling anxious and pressured and overwhelmed, even to the point of tears, staying together is more important than ever. There are no bad guys. We all want what is best for students. And the hard truth, this pandemic makes perfect solutions impossible. So we'll navigate the challenges to the best of our ability, and I believe we are better when we work together. One of our board goals was to regularly review our learning model at least every 3 weeks. Tonight's agenda will focus on that, and in particular at the K-5 level. I'll be upfront. We have so much to review, discuss, and question tonight that it will probably take another meeting to address recommendations from Dr. Smith about next steps. We will, however, try to be clear tonight about the timeline. So with that, Dr. Smith, if you could kick it off.
I sure will. If you don't mind, I'm going to add some of my own comments to yours, and I want to thank you and echo the gratitude, for all of the folks involved here across the community. Debbie, you said it. I'm going to restate it, and this is how I start every morning, just reminding myself that we're in the midst of a global pandemic, and life has been disrupted in every possible way. And I know you all know it, and I know you're all living it, and we all have an incredible desire to try to return to some sense of normalcy in whatever way we can find it. It bears restating again that we are in a time and a period that we have never faced in this generation. And so for us, in a global pandemic, we're tasked with educating, re-engaging students, families, teachers in our schools. We're tasked with delivering a robust curriculum, promoting healthy development of all, nurturing connections, and as adults, we're tasked with staying socially and emotionally healthy so we can remain good, strong, positive role models for all of our children. So I think in contemplating this task and how we get it done, first and foremost, we also have to name that we're all under an incredible amount of stress and pressure. So that goes for all of our educators, our parents, those of us on this call, and people all across the community, by simple virtue of the fact that we are in a global pandemic. We feel high levels of anxiety as we continue to operate in this environment that constantly shifts and is filled with so much uncertainty. And like so many other communities across the country, we're faced with serious and difficult decisions that must be made with incomplete and changing information. So recognizing this as a community that cares deeply about each other, as a community that cares deeply about its children and its teachers, and as a community that cares passionately about education, I think we have to continue to remain calm and clear-sighted, and we have to continue to work collaboratively. In the face of such high levels of stress, anxiety, and uncertainty, I call on all of us and all members of our community to be reminded, Debbie, as you just said a minute ago, we're in this together. We don't have to agree with or like decisions that are made, but we do need to acknowledge that collectively, we're all working with the very best of intentions. To add to that, we also need to be kind. And I say that to everybody. In moments of high stress and anxiety, kindness is often the first thing that goes. While the children are watching, and the children are always watching, we have to be kind. In addition, and one of the strategies that I use to help cope with stress and anxiety is we need to practice an attitude of gratitude. And I love the fact that you started this meeting by recognizing all the people who deserve that gratitude. We have to recognize the incredible efforts that are being made on behalf of others across this community. That's why I'm particularly enamored with the little website on Facebook called Wilton Compliments. What a beautiful expression of that gratitude. Efforts being made to make school positive and productive across this community and among our educators and staff and children. Efforts are being made to provide supplemental activities that support the growth and development of our children, and efforts being made by so many to faithfully adhere to the COVID-19 mitigation strategies like mask wearing and social distancing. On this piece, I'll just note this last effort is our shared obligation. Whether you're a student at the high school, an adult, or someone else in the community, you must take it seriously. That is our way that we're going to continue to manage the COVID-19 transmission rates in this community. So on that note, I want to transition to a very brief discussion about the hybrid model, and then I want to get into really the meat of the matter tonight. First, as you said, Debbie, and I think we all need to express just an incredible debt of gratitude to our teachers. They have done and are doing everything we've asked. We've laid down the educational gauntlet and they're getting the job done. We've asked them to learn a new platform, to learn all kinds of technology hardware, create a community with a class that's split between remote and person. And on the whole, they are doing unbelievably, remarkably, extraordinarily well. This task is incredibly demanding and fraught with difficulties, and they show up every day and they do it with a smile because they're thrilled to be in front of their kids. In the last 2 weeks, here's what I've seen. First, as has been discussed, this model is brand new. And so I see a great deal of teachers and teachers working with each other as well as with kids, troubleshooting to make it work. There have definitely been challenges as we implement this model. You've heard Zoom has had issues, Google has had issues, we've had connectivity issues, we've had Chromebook and other hardware issues, camera issues, volume issues, the list goes on, but teachers are making it work. And what I see as I walk from classroom to classroom and I talk to people, first and foremost, they're just really happy to have students back in front of them. As I also talk to students, they too are happy to be back in school. So on that note, the logistics are imperfect, but they're working. All of the others that you listed, transportation, lunch services, they seem to get smoother every single day. And I see a group of staff and students who are managing the environment and are adapting. On the mitigation strategy front, I see lots of evidence of all of our community members implementing those mitigation strategies. So I've had no conversations about lots and lots of difficulties pervasively in the community of people wearing masks. We understand that little ones are challenged by that sometimes, but again, on the whole, mask wearing, we had a lot of concerns about that in the summer. Our young people and our adults are tolerating wearing masks, and it's a really, I think, effective implementation of that mitigation strategy. The social distancing, as you know, in this hybrid, our desks are spread out 6 feet apart. We've really had to limit movement in the class and movement around schools, and we've tried to cohort kids. And again, far from ideal, but our kids and our teachers are making it work. And so I would say those pieces, they're really coming together nicely, and I see improvements just about every day. So I wanted to say again, I'm grateful for all of them, for our teachers, our students, our parents, for trying to take all of this new environment in stride, trying to remain positive and continuing to be committed to figuring it out. This is what life is like educating in a pandemic. Saying all that, we also know we have acute issues with some of our youngest learners around remote learning, and we're going to talk about that momentarily. I just want to pause for a second and see if there are, a couple questions about the hybrid environment. And then what I'd like to do is really just move to the learning model, just because I know we have a lot to talk about there, and Dr. Mackin is here with us. Great, so this is like the first Zoom call I've ever had where in a moment nobody said anything. So that either means I'm on mute or you're all on mute. Great. So shall we move to the next piece of the agenda and just get into the conversation about Miller Driscoll Cider Mill?
Sure. And wherever Dr. Mackin, can come in, that would be helpful.
Great. All right. Yep. We're going to put her right on stage here in just a second. So in setting up this part of the conversation, again, I would just frame all of my comments as gratitude for the partnership and can-do attitude of so many of our staff, families, and students. As you know, we closed schools on Wednesday, March 11th, and then we reopened virtually on Monday, March 16th, 2 days and a weekend after that. We labored through the spring to provide an education that's completely new and different, and we learned tremendous lessons along the way. We spent the last number of months planning and didn't really have a clear picture of what school was going to look like until we were into July. The state of Connecticut asked us to put together 3 plans, one for all in person, one for a hybrid model, and one for full remote learning. They also stipulated that we need to accommodate any of those families who choose to be on full remote learning for the duration. We've done that. As we got closer to the first planned day, as you know, we learned new information and we adapted. So we started our first week in shortened remote days, and now we've spent the last 2 weeks in our hybrid model. We chose this course because the environment's so new and so uncertain, we believe that proceeding cautiously with respect to bringing large groups of people, adults and students, back under one roof was prudent. As Debbie noted, we laid out a number of reopening goals that prioritized looking at the science and the data as best we could understand it around COVID-19. We committed to reviewing on a 3-week cycle. the COVID-19 transmission rates, as well as our effectiveness of implementing various mitigation strategies, wearing face coverings, practicing social distancing, conducting enhanced cleaning, practicing hand washing and hand sanitizing, increasing the fresh airflow in classrooms and school buildings, and then cohorting students as much as possible. We have data that's published weekly from the State Department of Health that describes new COVID-19 cases per 100,000 on a rolling 7-day average. From the State Department of Health for the week of September 10th, Fairfield County was 3.4 per 100,000. As of yesterday, that number increased to 4.3 per 100,000. There's another website called COVID Act Now, which aggregates a lot of this transmission rate data. And that website indicates a daily new case rate of 6.8 per 100,000, as well as an infection rate of 1.15. So those indicators across each of those websites are on the rise, and they do suggest that COVID-19 is spreading in our region. So the Department of Public Health proposed that districts measure implementation of mitigation strategies. They've offered no tools or no guidance on how best to do that. When I was on a call with the Department of Public Health and asked them directly, what's your recommendation? They told me to be holistic. So we've developed locally a tool to help us capture information about our mitigation strategies, and we're just beginning to use it this week. My general sense, as I explained a moment ago, is that our mitigation strategies are being implemented with fidelity. We do see students and staff wearing masks. Our current social distance practices allow for 6 feet, and students and staff are using the hand sanitizing stations. The ventilation system is set to maximize fresh airflow. Custodians engage routinely in cleaning and disinfecting. Now, in assessing a timeline for returning our K-5 students, we turn to our health experts for guidance. Our health director is charged with reviewing our plan and making a recommendation, and we rely on our medical advisor for recommendations based on her review of the COVID-19 transmission data. On that front, as you know, we were looking at September 29th to begin the phase-in of our elementary students, beginning with kindergarten. But given the very recent increase in cases, the recommendation from Dr. Mackin yesterday, and then supported by Health Director Barry Bogle, is that we set October 5th as the target date to begin the phase-in return of all of our elementary students. This date's going to enable us to watch the trends a little bit more and see in other communities where it seems to be spiking how they're responding with their mitigation strategies. But Dr. Mackin is here, and so I want to give her the floor so she can take us through her recommendation and the rationale. I did want to note for the board and anyone else who may be listening, Dr. Mackin's been a proponent of returning all of our elementary students back to school. And when we spoke on Tuesday, she was still in support of getting them in as soon as possible. It was yesterday when she emailed with a recommendation to push that start date off a little bit because of her interpretation of what's happening with COVID-19 here. So Dr. Mackin, thank you for joining us. I will, just for the good of the order here, also note that you've been a member of our reopening committee that was meeting through the summer, and you've been tremendously helpful in responding to questions, in explaining the guidance published by the American Academy of Pediatrics, and being such a strong advisor to our Director of Nursing, Barb Shum. So welcome tonight, and why don't we start with your recommendation and rationale, and then I'm sure our board members will have questions. But yesterday you told me October 5th is probably a better day. And so why don't you take us through what you saw?
Yes, and thanks so much for having me. And again, to echo what everybody else has said, I really appreciate all the work that everybody has been doing. And, from Board of Ed, administrators, teachers, parents, kids, everybody's working really hard. So as Dr. Smith said, I really, would have been a proponent of getting the elementary students back in school as soon as we can. I think it's important on a number of levels. But as he said, we spoke earlier this week, talking through what would change, when we have increased numbers of kids in school. I still felt, looking at the numbers, seeing that they were low, that it made sense to try and move forward. But I keep a close eye on the 7-day rolling average, both in the state and in Fairfield County. And so what's reported, on that state website, they sort of look at it a week at a time. So what is reported today ends the week of September 12th. So that the data that's up on their website now is the data through September 12th. But looking over the past week, relative numbers. On September 7th, we had a number of about 1.9 cases per 100,000. That was that rolling 7-day average, and it was up to 7.5 yesterday when I had emailed. Now it's down a little bit again because it's this constant rolling 7-day average. It's at about 6.4. But I just felt like we really needed to keep a close eye on that, because that was a big increase in a week. And if that trend continues, then we would definitely be over that 10 cases per 100,000, where that does not favor complete in-person. So I think we need a little bit more time. The other thing to think about in looking at the mitigation strategies and assessing how well they're working, we're always looking at a 2-week period, right? So there's, from time of exposure, we need to look at 2 weeks to see sort of what are the consequences of that exposure. So if you have a case in school, you need to look kind of 2 weeks out to see, how much spread do you see from that one case. And as we start to see, hear about cases in schools, schools needing to close for a case, which is not surprising, right? We expect that we're going to see cases in schools, but I just think we need a little bit more time to see, the mitigation strategies that we already have in place at the schools with the masking and the distance of 6 feet. Does that control spread before we start thinking about increasing the number of kids who are in school, having them in closer proximity to each other? I think we just need a little bit more time first. So if anybody has any questions about that, and then I did have a couple other questions that Dr. Smith had forwarded that I can speak to as well from the board.
Yes, Doctor, how are you?
Hey, good. How are you?
Okay. The spike or the increase, do we know, or are the numbers, or is the detail available? All it would take would be one large family or large gathering occurrence, where a number of people in that event get sick to spike, to drive the increase. And does anybody look at those things to be rational in the decision making about, well, had it not been for that, we would still be at 1 point whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an important consideration that we need to understand, or somebody needs to look at and talk about, because we're making really significant decisions based on that. And to say, no, we can't do it because in wherever it was, there was this huge gathering of people and 27 people came down with COVID.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's a really good question. It's actually one of the reasons why they recommend, instead of looking at the town level, really looking at the county level, so that you have a little bit less of the impact of those spikes for sort of closer, family units. I don't have an age stratification, looking sort of where the increase is seen, what age group. It would be really interesting to be able to see that, but we don't. But it is concerning to see it around the time where where schools are opening. And I think we just need a little bit more time before we can tell sort of what, or have a better understanding of where that increase is coming from and at what age group.
Okay.
Dr. Mackin, can you talk about the infection rate? Because that is one of those indicators that also, is trending in the wrong direction for our purposes, and it seems to have moved, pretty dramatically in the last week or so.
Right. So the infection rate is basically how rapidly the virus is spreading in a community. And we had been at pretty low levels, below 1 for a number of weeks. And now we're at what's considered a more moderate level. It's 1.1, 1.2. Above 1.4 is considered a high level. That's a rapid rate of spread. At the peak, it's definitely concerning that not only are we seeing we're seeing more cases, but it's also spreading more rapidly than it had been.
Thanks.
Dr. Mackin, can you emphasize or explain, because I know some people will go to and have, including me, go to the Connecticut Department of Health or the State Department of Education and see their metrics. Mm-hmm. And, just looking at those numbers, it seems like we would be labeled low But it sounds like you're adding trends. So can you just talk a little bit about that and what, sort of, when your radar starts to go up or antennae to go up?
Yeah, for me, it was really, seeing that what we saw in a week was 2 to 3 times increase in the rate per 100,000. And that just, again, speaks to that sort of level of spread. So while we're still low, if that rate of rise continued, you'd very quickly be above that 10 per 100,000. We're more concerned. And that's why, so I'm still, very hopeful to get kids in school, but we just need to see where the trend is going. If we have another week or two where, okay, now it kind of settles back out, maybe it's related to, increased testing as lots of kids went back to college, and we see it start to settle out, then I'm hopeful that we can get kids back, but we just need to see sort of where it's going.
Okay, and one more question. You had mentioned the being able to test the social distancing of 6 feet. And that would take, you said, a couple of weeks. And I think we're coming up on the end of the second week of that for us. So if anything kind of were to happen, it would, where 6 feet is clearly just not working, we would expect to see that in the next few days.
I would expect so, but more so far we've had one case that we know of at the high school level, right? So it's really 2 weeks from that, 2 weeks from seeing an exposure where we need to see, and see how much, if we see any, spread related to that. And again, in other school districts where they may have had a school closed because of an exposure, the testing of those, so on the one hand, yes, we need to look at sort of 2 weeks from start of school. That would really more tell me about asymptomatic cases, that were there at the start of school. But once you have a case in the school, then it's really 2 weeks from that point to see how the mitigation strategies have been able to isolate that one case and not see spread within the school community.
All right, so then we'd be looking out minimally another week.
Okay.
To get to that.
And then, and again, I suspect the answer is no, but I'm wondering, is there any research, experience, schools, places, any situations you can point to where students have been using 3 feet and a mask versus 6 feet and a mask? Because that's what going full open for us would mean, is that the social distance gets cut from 6 feet to 3 feet.
Right. So I don't know of anywhere where we have data on that, specific to the school situation. One of the questions that I had gotten was, what is the evidence? What do we know about, 3 feet versus 6 feet, with masks or without masks? Really, the study that we look to that gives guidance on that it's a paper that was published back in June, and they looked at 170 different studies that looked at both COVID-19 and also 2 related viruses, SARS and MERS, and looking at how does physical distancing impact spread, how do masks impact spread, and then also eye coverage, how does that affect spread as well? So and even that study doesn't look at the 2 in combination. So it tells us that physical distancing alone is protective. 3 feet shows a good amount of protection, 6 feet even more so. And then masks are probably even more of a powerful protector than the physical distancing, based on the data from those 170 studies. A lot of those studies were done in healthcare settings, although a lot are not. Many of them were with surgical masks or N95s. Some did include cloth masks. So it's a little bit of a difficult, we don't have sort of perfect data to look at that would give us exactly this situation that we'd be looking at. But I do think that, reviewing the study again today, the masks show even more protection than the physical distancing. So I think that if we see numbers stay or, kind of level out, that it would be okay to move forward with having the kids in school with 3 feet of distance.
So if we can just kind of stick on that point for a little bit of time, because I think that's been one of the probably predominant questions and concerns, at least among our staff, as we've been talking about bringing all of our elementary kids back in the last couple of days, is um, what does it mean to move from 6 feet to 3 feet, and then just thinking about the life of a school. So within the classroom, we have everybody wearing a cloth mask. Even if we're changing the social distance in classrooms, students will have these kind of trifold plexiglass barriers on their desks. Teachers will have this other glass barrier, plexiglass barrier that they can use. I mean, none of that creates an optimal learning environment for sure, but in terms of limiting the spread, as layered mitigation strategies, I know we're not eliminating risk, but do kind of each one of those things kind of compound safety, so to speak, and kind of, up our chances for limiting the spread?
I would expect so. I don't have solid data to look at to say, yes, these are additive, measures. But I would anticipate that they are.
Yeah. So, and I guess just imagining the, kind of life in school. So, kids don't plop into the classroom, they have to get there. And then there are lots of other things that happen throughout the school day. So there are other questions about with, a much more densely populated building. How much do we increase the risk if we have kids, kind of walking in hallways and, more kids out at recess, even if they're spread out? And then what are there other mitigation strategies that maybe we should be thinking about, again, just to help reinforce a safer environment?
Yeah, so I think the thing that I jumped to there, it's really just the number of chances of exposure that that you have. The more children that you have there, right? If you have one positive or one child who is positive in a classroom, now you've doubled the number of children that at least who may be exposed. Plus increasing the numbers on buses, or we don't think that much about sort of chance meetings in the hallway, that are brief for brief periods of time, that being as concerning. But the more people that you have, the more particles that possibly can be aerosolized, into the air. It's definitely something to to think about. And I think all the things that you guys have been thinking about with the sort of staggered start times and that sort of thing. You just as much as you can to minimize the number of people in one place at one time. I don't have anything else in addition, really. That
Understood.
Can I ask one question that my assumption has been, and I just need the most current thinking on it, is that there are differences between children and adults or ages of children, just in terms of either their transmission or their susceptibility. Can you talk to us about, the differences? It seems like our natural inclination, because of their social emotional needs, but also because they're little, and there hasn't seemed to be that much data around COVID and little kids. But, that's certainly an assumption that may or may not be based on anything. So I'm going to just need to pick your brain since you're here. Yeah, and this is something that I think is, there's a decent amount of data to say older children, that the teenagers, that they can spread the virus just as efficiently as adults can. They still have much less severe disease, and they make up a lower number of the cases that we see. The reason for that, I don't think is still completely understood, whether it's that they have more mild disease that's not tested, particularly back in the spring when we think about this, before we knew that runny nose could be a symptom, or stomach upset could be a symptom. There probably were a good number of children that were not tested, and so those cases were missed. So there's a question, whether we sort of falsely lowered the numbers because their disease is less severe. In younger children, there are lots of places that have looked at, and there does not seem to be that much transmission from younger children to adults, or to other children. They've looked at sort of the amount of virus that you can find in children's respiratory tract. It seems to be about the same, maybe even higher than adults. So again, there's a lot of theories out there as to why they may not spread it as well to adults, mainly thinking that they cannot aerosolize the virus as well as as adults can. So we do generally see less spread from children to adults and children to other children at the 10 and under age.
There are a couple of recent studies that have looked at, there were daycares in Utah where there was definitely some spread from infants to parents. But it seems to be that that spread is really more in sort of a household setting, not in, like a school or even a daycare setting. And I think it's just, sort of much more close contacts that you have, in a household setting. The other area that they've looked at was the camps in Georgia, or some overnight sleepaway camps where masks were not required, and there definitely was spread between children in that setting as well. So they can spread the virus, they just are not as good at spreading it as adults.
Okay. Thank you.
Dr. Mackin, I have some questions. You mentioned, and thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, of course.
I'm just going to ask the question that I think is on a lot of people's minds. How you said that, or I think Kevin said that we should be looking at it from a county perspective. How are other schools doing this? I know we've all heard of New Canaan is starting. I think Westport is starting. Norwalk, parts of Norwalk have already been in since the beginning. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Sorry. We all get the same data. It's the data from the Department of Public Health, and then whatever else is available. This website that Dr. Mackin uses, that Global Health, the Harvard Global Health Project, is another tracking source. So they're not looking at different data necessarily.
Right. So I'm just curious what you think the difference is, because when I'm looking at the data, our cases seem to be lower than some of those towns as far as our infection rate and our per 100,000. So I'm just curious what your thoughts were.
Yeah, it's tough, and I think there had been some discussion at the beginning, of this for school medical advisors to maybe work together, but we haven't really seen that much of that. So it's hard to know. Everywhere is doing things a little bit differently. But when I talked earlier this week, the numbers looked low. But it's what I've seen in the past couple of days that really has me, concerned, and I'm not sure that how close everybody's keeping on that day-to-day data. Again, if you look at the state website, while there's a bump from the week ending the 10th to the week ending the 17th, it's a little bit less impressive than what you see in the past few days.
And then how are we able to analyze that data if we can't determine the ages, though? I mean, I know we talked about this, but is it hard to, could some of these not be affecting child age at all, and some of these families have no children and no access to any children? I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, it could be. I also, there's some doctors at Yale who do conferences sort of on a bi-weekly basis giving advice. What they had seen, they were seeing the highest levels in the older teenagers, so that the rest of the state was at about a 2%. It was like 16%, positivity rate in the teenagers. So it's really hard to say. Thinking about this today, trying to, even if it is sort of that college age, if that's where we see the bulk of these cases, what concerns me is thinking about, how many college age providers help with childcare, to younger children. How many parents do we have that work on the, university campuses? So I just don't feel like, regardless of where the age is, where we see the most cases, I can't say that's not going to affect families in our area.
And then Kevin, I know we've been talking about 6 feet and 3 feet social distance. Have we figured out, based on our surveys, I think like 75% of parents at Miller Driscoll want their kids back. For those parents who don't, have we figured out, if we were to go back, let's say, I know we're not, but if we were to go back next week, how many kids would actually be in class every day?
Yeah, we have rough numbers, so we're talking.
So like, what would the average class number be for kindergarten, first and second, based on the parents who are fully remote and based on the parents who don't feel comfortable sending their kids back if we can't guarantee the 6 feet?
There's a range. So, looking at kindergarten, there's a range on the, low side of like 14 to the higher side of 17. And we'd have to, one of the things we might have to do is some rebalancing, depending. Grade 1, similar. It looks like, 13, 14 on the lower side to 17 on the higher side. Second grade is a little higher, 15 to 19. And then cider mill, the numbers, we don't have survey data yet. Jen just sent that survey out a little while ago, but, looking at our current numbers, if they were to stay the same, they range from, it looks like, again, maybe 13, 14, 15 on the low side to 18, 19 on the high side. We've got some 20, 21s right now in 5th grade.
Okay. And then one more question, Dr. Mackin. You were saying if the levels stay the same. From a statistics point, it's hard to say like there's a difference between 6.4 and 6.8 when you're looking at 100,000. And I understand there's a statistically significant, but so if everything stays 6.4, if it goes up to 7, I'm just curious what your number is in your head of this is safe, this is trending not safe. If we are at the same spot and we are at a 6 point, right now we're at a 6.4, 6.8, and we go up to a 7, is that considered a statistically significant trend upward, or are you still comfortable that that's less than the 10?
So if we saw that number, 6.87, stay around that, what I would expect is to see that infection rate come down. And, that would tell me it's spreading less rapidly. And so, again, I think any amount of kind of stability there, if I saw that infection rate coming down, I would be happy with that. So even, like you said, there's, again, it's more, so I wouldn't want to see the number double again in the next week. But if it stayed around this level below that 10, and the infection rate is coming down again, that would be reassuring.
And my last question, as a pediatrician, have you seen a lot of mental angst and of kids? We get a lot of emails about how difficult this is from kids K through 2. I'm just curious if you're seeing that, these kids who are really struggling, sitting in front of a computer all day, 3 days a week.
I think it's hard, as a pediatrician, but talking to parents who are having a hard time, young kids, teenagers. I mean, there's, I would say the pandemic in general, right? It is amplifying anxiety at a number of different levels. And, again, as much as we would love to get things back to normal, even the idea of that, that is anxiety provoking for kids as well. So there's, I see it on both sides. I definitely, see it in parents as well. It's really hard, and that's probably one of the biggest reasons why I would like to get those young kids back into school. I think that would help mental health for young kids, for parents, but I also just want to make sure that we're doing it safely and not in a way that that causes more illness and then more angst and anxiety in that way.
And when does flu season officially start?
So we generally say about October, we start to see it. Here it's usually a little bit later than that. I've heard other parts of the country, maybe you're starting to see a little bit, but for us here, it's typically later.
Right. So if you don't mind, and pardon if other board members have a question, pardon me if I keep jumping in here, but any thoughts? We've also kind of heard, generically out in the ether, this concern about a second wave of COVID-19. And, I think the concern about that seems to ebb and flow depending on, the source of the conversation. But do you have your own concerns about a second wave, and, what leads you to those concerns if you do?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So when we talked about a second wave, people sort of were equating coronavirus, or looking at the same way we look at flu seasons, right? So you see it kind of seasonally come back, sort of, no matter what, and worrying that it was going to follow that pattern. But once we started to see cases in, in other areas, during warmer months, we realized it's really not following that same model. And so it's a lot more difficult to predict. I think what is concerning as far as a second wave is trying to figure out how much the virus is changing, right? Because they're constantly, sort of mutating and changing, and did having it before, does that give you any protection against having it again? That's really what we're going to need to figure out in order to see whether we're going to see a second wave. Because if you had it, but you develop antibodies, but they're not protective against getting it again, we're much more likely to see a big increase in cases again.
Right. Can I ask a question? Oh, sorry, Jen, go ahead.
Go ahead.
sometimes, we hear the concepts of, some sort of screening people either through COVID tests, rapid tests, slow tests. I'm not sure where the technology is at this point. And also temperature checks, trying to go into a lot of some venues, require temperature checks, et cetera. Do you feel that any of that is appropriate for schools or not?
So the temperature checks really don't seem to be beneficial. I think we've seen somewhere about 40% of kids who have COVID don't have a fever at any point during their illness. Temperature can vary so much during the day. That doesn't really seem to be a very high yield screening tool, although a lot of places are still using it, including our own office. As far as testing, the rapid testing, so the rapid tests themselves, not particularly accurate, it really depends on sort of the levels in the population, how accurate they are and how many false negatives and false positives you're going to have. The PCR tests are a little more accurate, but they take a few days to get the results back. And really, when you're doing one of those tests, it just tells you you are negative at that moment. But if you're going to develop symptoms in 24, 48 hours, there's no way to know that, right? And you are contagious in the couple of days before you develop symptoms. So you could actually be contagious, but be negative, on a test. So I think it's useful, in the case where there is exposures, to try and look to see if there's any, asymptomatic carriers, trying to screen for that. So if there is a history of exposure, I think it's useful to do screening tests on people. And I think it's useful to guide sort of return to school. How long, is this, is it not, is there exposure, is there not, and trying to quarantine. But I don't know that mass screening is beneficial.
Okay. So I guess my last question is, are there any mitigation strategies that you think we should be using that we're not, or that you would suggest that we also consider?
I can't think of anything else. I think we spent a lot of time talking about the mitigation strategies, over the summer and the committee, and I think that the district has done a really good job, with the plan that they put together. And if anything that I think of or come across, I would definitely let you know, but nothing that I can think of as of now.
Thank you. Other board members? I'm sorry, I cut some. Jen, did I cut you off? I'm so sorry.
First, this is really for anybody. Have we looked at all at the trends of schools in other states that have been in school much longer than we have? And just seen how they're doing over a period of time, and or looked at the 6 feet versus 3 feet distance difference?
I have not come across, I haven't gone out searching specifically, but I receive a lot of literature, and I haven't seen, anything, honestly.
The only thing I've seen was from Germany. I think they've been in school for a month, and they really have not seen any significant outbreaks as a result of schools being open. But I don't have a sense of where their numbers are, what their policies are. There are some groups of sort of physicians, pediatricians across the country, school physicians across the country who are trying to. But there's such different policies in place in different places, whether they require masks or not, or so I don't have any. Nothing concrete that I could share.
Okay, thanks.
Any other board members have questions? All right, Dr. Mackin, you've been invaluable to us, so really appreciate your time and your expertise, and we've asked you a lot of questions and tough questions, and so anyway, so thank you so much for being a calm head in the middle of this pandemic. So thank you.
Of course, thank you. Thanks for all you're doing.
Yeah,
Okay.
Thank you.
so much. I really
Of course.
taking the time tonight.
Of course. All right. Take care, everyone.
Good night. Thank you so much.
Bye. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, Kevin, where are you going to take us next?
Oh, that was just important to hear from Dr. Mackin, and
Absolutely.
all clear on her recommendation and why. So we're looking at October 5th. And as I said at the start of the meeting, I was in touch with Barry Bogle about that recommendation, and he concurred at the time. And he and I are going to speak tomorrow too. He's got some other questions about our plans that I'll follow up with him on. But I think it was important to hear that what Dr. Mackin's recommendation was, and that Barry's in the same place. So so that, assuming following their guidance, that'll be our target date. So I think the next step here.
Can I just ask, just clarify, just to make it clear, we're talking our target date, October 5th, K through 5.
Elementary schools.
Yeah, elementary schools.
I think even given what we just heard Dr. Mackin say about the virus operates differently. I think we need different conversations about the middle school and the high school.
Yeah, no. I just wanted to clear that we're talking both elementary schools, October 5th target date.
Yeah.
And one more clarification also, we are only pushing this back 1 week, correct? We were supposed to open the 29th, and now we're looking at the 5th.
We were looking at the 29th, and now we're looking at October 5th based on their recommendations, right?
Okay. I just want people to understand it. We're pushing it back just 1 week.
Correct.
And Kevin, you're recommending full day in school, or are we open to some sort of alternative day?
Certainly, I think that's a conversation that's been had quite a bit in the last 24 hours. And, I think let's use tonight to talk through, and I'd like to rely on our principals and other expert educators here on the call. I think, like with anything, Mandy, there are benefits and drawbacks to every model and anything that we would put forward. And so I think, what I would say tonight is let's kind of talk at a higher level about what the reentry could look like. And I've asked both Jen and Kathy and their teams to use tomorrow and Monday to really kind of refine some models that then we can take a look at again. And so I think we're going to propose having another meeting prior to Thursday. So, we can come to a final recommendation. But there's so many, as you're about to hear, so many logistical pieces to all of this, and so many benefits and drawbacks in each consideration that we really need to kind of take them in turn and weigh them. So I think on that note, what I would ask is, Kathy kind of talk to us about what she and her team are thinking for Miller Driscoll, and then we'll, review some questions and get some feedback, and then we'll go on to Dr. Falcone at Cider Mill.
Okay.
Welcome.
Ready? All right, so I'm going to start off with a celebration similar to what Kevin and Debbie both did. At Miller Driscoll, every time we have a faculty meeting, we start with celebrations, and Dr. Cross led our faculty meeting yesterday morning, and he actually universally designed our celebration so people could unmute and talk at the Zoom meeting. They could type it into the chat, they could tweet, they could send an email, whatever, but he reminded us all there's a lot to celebrate. So tonight I want to first celebrate all our youngest learners at Miller Driscoll. They are so excited to be back, the ones who have come back to the school building, even if it's only been for a few days, and they are flexible. They are finding their way in the hallways with lots of help from a lot of the grown-ups, and they are learning great things. And I love stories about the littlest kids, and so today at dismissal, one of the pairs came up and said, "Oh, you know what? One of the kindergartners said today, Kathy, that Mrs. Kuhn is the nicest person in the building." I was like, oh my gosh, that is one smart kid right there, right? And she said, but he did have to qualify it that I am not the nicest person in the world because that is 911. 911 are the nicest people in the world because they help you. But I at least got nicest for the building. So I will take it. So obviously they're learning, right? I mean, they're very smart kids. I also want to thank the parents because they are doing amazing work supporting the kids. whether they're bringing the kids into school or whether they're supporting the kids at home via remote learning or, you know, taking them to programs that are providing support. They've been amazing and they have sent me a lot of feedback, and I'm going to give you info on some of that feedback. And then last but not least, my staff, they're, I don't know, I get a little bit choked up when I talk about them because I will tell you, they are incredible. They are flexible, they are hardworking, they are problem solvers. It is incredible. It's incredible to watch. And they have delivered remote instruction and now instruction through a hybrid model. And so I couldn't be more proud of them. So since we last spoke, we had an opportunity to do a couple of different surveys, and I know Mandy referred to one of them, but we did a parent survey and we did a teacher survey. And we just looked at a few things because we, again, had gotten a lot of feedback about the remote learning days and then about sort of people's comfort level with bringing the kids back 4 days a week. So we surveyed the parents. We got over 600 responses to the survey, which is kind of amazing. And for the most part, like Mandy said, I don't know how she has all this insider info. It's like spoiler alert, but anyway, 75% of, that's okay, 75% of all of the respondents when we looked at the remote learning days said they would prefer the day to be 9:15 to 1:15. We did break it out by hybrid and then remote to see if, you know, what the difference was there. And when we looked at the hybrid only people who responded, that was about 76% thought the day should be shorter, with 25 still liking the longer day. But when we looked at remote only, we were at about 60-40. So still even 60% of those people who have students who are remote only thought the day, you know, it's a long time and it's a lot of screen time. So I think, you know, we had some pretty good agreement there. And I will tell you that my staff, out of all the staff who responded, we surveyed the certified staff. 97% of them agreed that the remote days should be shortened. So there is a lot of agreement there. When we looked at the option to expand to 4 days, 80% of all of the parent respondents said, we asked the question saying, if we expanded to 4 days, would you send your child or would you not send your child? Super simple. So 78.6 said yes, they would send their child out of all of the respondents, and 21.4 said no. We broke that out also by hybrid only and remote just to see what those numbers would be. So again, the hybrid only, 86% of those parents said they would send their children, and 14% said they would not send their children for the 4 days. So even though they were sending them for the 2, they would not go to the 4, at least not at that point. So the survey went out last Friday, so we hadn't been in school too many days. For the remote only students, interestingly, about 12% of them said yes, they would send their children 4 days. So these are kids who weren't going at all. And about 88% said no, they still wouldn't send their children. I have gotten a lot of parent emails, believe it or not, and many of you board members have seen a lot of those emails. Most of them, first off, compliment the staff as to, you know, the work that they're doing. They know it's not easy and they know they're working really hard. But they do say that the remote days are very long and just the screen time, it's a lot of screen time. And, you know, like people said before, some people's, you know, some kids are, you know, having outbursts, some kids are not reacting well to it. Some kids can even maintain during the school day, but then what parents see after is, you know, a little bit upsetting. Parents did also, there were a lot of responses saying they want the kids to be brought back, but if you know, even if you can't bring the kids back right away, would you please shorten the remote day? Then after the survey went out, interestingly enough, we heard from a lot of the parents of kids in the hybrid program who said, well, I think the hybrid program is actually going really well. And now that my child has had a little bit more of, you know, the balance of remote days and in-person days, there were some people who said, you know, I might consider sending my child 4 days a week, but I want to wait just a little bit. So there were some parents after the survey went out who then sent me separate emails saying, you know, can we just give the hybrid a little more time? So that's, you know, where we were with the parents. With the staff members, 60% when you look at overall, so you have to understand that when we surveyed the certified staff members, These are the classroom teachers, special ed teachers, related service, specialists, mental health staff. 60% were in favor of expanding to 4 days, and 40% were not in favor of expanding. Obviously, the numbers don't tell the whole story, and we did ask staff members for comments, and so I'm just going to give you some bullet points. What we did as an administrative team is we all reviewed separately the comments and came up with what we thought were like the top 5 themes in each of the areas, and then we compared notes. So that was sort of our study of the whole thing. We did ask staff members what was successful in the current model. They said that meeting the students during the remote days actually made coming into the building much easier because they knew the kids and the kids knew them without masks because they were on the screen. They were all very happy to have students back in school. They are very proud of the collaboration among the teachers and the staff. Preschool loves having our preschool kids on site for 4 days. The specialists who have a combination of both live instruction and remote classes, they appreciate having less exposure. Art, music, and LLC all go into the classroom. So as you can imagine, if they're going into, every single classroom and not doing any remote, that does increase their exposure to the number of students. They did say having fewer students in the building helps to ease some of the procedures. So things like arrival, dismissal, bathroom, lunch, recess, etc. People did think the shortened remote day on Wednesday was definitely working. And most felt as though the mitigation strategies, although you have to understand these are little kiddos, but that they did think that they are successful with the cohorting, the mask wearing, the social distancing, again, as much as possible, because like Kevin said, their desks might be 6 feet apart, but we still have to get to those desks and there's still some moving around. When we looked at what was challenging with the current model, all of the, a huge response was engaging students in learning on the remote days. They felt the days are too long, both on-site and remotely. Managing Schoology has been a huge lift for the teachers, especially of the youngest kids, the tech portion, the planning, and then the students' ability to use it, especially because a lot of them can't read. There is a huge lack of play and socialization opportunities at Miller Driscoll, and we love to play. So not being able to use the playground, not being able to share equipment or play supplies, that definitely takes the toll when the kids are in school. And then keeping the kids at their desks for longer periods of time with mask and social distancing, obviously that's a little bit tricky. Kids aren't used to sitting in one tiny spot for a while. They did have suggestions for improvement that included a more balanced approach for remote learning days in terms of synchronous and asynchronous activities. They did want consideration for early release on both on-site and remote days. They do want us to look at ways to make Schoology more user-friendly for our young learners. Most of them did want more on-site days. They want increased opportunities and materials for play, and they are begging to let the kids use the playground, and they would like some additional tech support. So those are the results of our surveys, and kind of a synopsis of what the staff has to say, as well as a lot of the feedback we got in emails from the parents. So that's sort of my first section. Do you want to ask me questions on that, or would you like me to just keep going and then?
Let's just summarize for a sec, because I think you shared a lot of great information. And so it seems to be pretty crystal clear along the way is that, if the board's going to make at least one decision tonight, voting to shorten the remote day would be one that I think sounds to me like just about everybody, parent, staff, would support. So I just want to keep that kind of separate and hold that out there, because that is something. And then I think, the other piece is, as Mandy had suggested before now, thinking about a return to school, it does sound like there's strong support for that idea among simple majority of your staff perhaps, but also many parents. So then I think these guys may have some questions, but just to frame the next piece, talking about what that could look like, and then what the timeline is that you're thinking about.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other questions before I go to the next section, or just keep going? All right, we're going to keep going. That was my tiny bit of wait time there. I do have to give a huge thanks to my admin team, because as we go into the next section, which is kind of what our proposal or what recommendations we would want you to consider moving forward. We've had a lot of meetings. We've considered so many things, and it's hard because poor Kevin has to listen to me when we have these conversations to say, I don't think you understand, because we have to consider this and this and this and this and this, and then I just go on, and then Dr. Falcone adds like 17 more things as well. So there's a lot to consider when making any kind of a change. So first, I'm just going to name a few. I'm going to name some of the maybe top 10. I don't know if it's 10, but first and foremost, we have to look at the developmental needs of, especially the group of students at my school. We have to consider the students who are on site. We have to consider the students who are remote only. We have to consider the students who have support from a parent at home. We have to consider students who are getting support maybe through a childcare facility like the Y or Wilton Continuing Ed or Comstock. We have to consider schedules. We have to consider mitigation strategies and how those will all work when adding more kids to the building. And we have to consider childcare plans, both for the students in the Wilton Public Schools, as well as the children of our faculty members, some of whom go to Wilton Public Schools, but some who go to other schools. So those are only a few things that we consider. And then we also consider sort of a big concept that sometimes people think that in this global pandemic that on-site instruction is better than remote instruction. And I will tell you, there are some things you can definitely do on-site. And then there are some things that you can do now that we are in this pandemic, you can only do remotely, like sing. You can't sing at school anymore, we're not allowed. Small group instruction, we can do remotely. It's much more difficult to do in the classroom because you can't bring small groups of children close together. So even though everyone sort of has this picture in their head that on-site is better, I would just say as we're going through this, I want people to kind of think of it both ways and remember there are things we can do on-site in a global pandemic and things that we can do remotely. So first and foremost, our phase one, like Kevin said, would be to reduce the amount of screen time for our youngest kiddos. And so we would look at changing those remote days and look at having students participate in synchronous and asynchronous learning activities around the core subject areas, and then specials in the morning from 9:15 to 1:15. And our scheduling guru, Janine Carley, I think she's on the 27th version of the schedule for this year, has looked at doing that. We would then look at that 1:15 to 3:15 time to be able to give kids time for recess. We would provide some asynchronous learning opportunities. I think that would help with some of the people who are okay with that longer remote day because they would be asynchronous off the screen. And then we would look at ways that, again, we could do some small groups in the afternoon, which I think the littlest kids respond, if they have to be remote, they do respond a little better when they're in small groups. So that we would like to do, we would love to do that starting Monday, just because like Kevin said, I think the overwhelming majority of people agree with that recommendation. And I think it would provide a lot of relief. Again, just the screen time and like I said, just accessing, that remote instruction is difficult for our littlest kids. Keep going. Okay. So phase two for us, and I guess we would rely on.
Can you tell us a little bit more, the shortened day, would it put any extra demands on the classroom teacher? If we shorten the remote days, just looking at the remote, so your kids does it change either the teachers that they see, or does it put an increased burden on the classroom teacher, or is it kind of like a win-win all around?
There would be a change of schedule. But they're pretty used to that really by this point in time. But other than that, there wouldn't be a huge change. So like I said, we would move all those core academics to the morning for those remote days. I think would be helpful. We are also, I do also need people to understand that when we started the year, the teachers were doing a lot of community building. They were getting to know the kids and the kids were getting to know them. So like in the classroom, there was a lot more whole group instruction and whole group activities, even when we were remote. And now that they know the kids better, now that they know sort of who can I put in the waiting room to work on something, who can I meet with in a small group, who might I need to maybe I have a special ed teacher in my class for this moment, or I have a paraprofessional in my class for this moment, who, can I put those kids in a breakout room, with some support. So I think the balance of screen time, on screen time versus off screen time, as well as synchronous versus asynchronous, I think is what we have to look at and kind of find the sweet spot for that. But I will say it's still, even if we go from 9:15 to 1:15, it is still tough for kindergarten.
Okay.
So
So
Kathy,
kindergarten
Did I answer
versus
your question?
Yeah, no, I think I would, in my mind, I'm sorry, I was probably getting Cider Mill and Miller Driscoll confused a little bit about how you were staffing and your schedule. So I apologize for that.
Yeah, our hybrid is a little different. So I think
yeah.
that's why it would be easier for us we could pretty quickly pivot into that model. So
All right. Do you think this would satisfy the kindergarten issues?
I think it would definitely be helpful. Like I said, they're the freshest in the morning. So we would seize the opportunity for that. And then, like I said, providing activities in the afternoon. So again, if we have parents who, want to be there, want to support those activities with the kids and want them to do that, that would be great. And again, early on, several of the kindergarten teachers said, even if we could take that end of the day time and again, just schedule some small groups, we thought that would be beneficial as well.
Okay, so you would be recommending, this is a hybrid model change of remote days to shortened days, and you would recommend starting that ASAP.
Monday would be awesome.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions?
So Kathy, just a question if I'm a parent of Miller Driscoll. So what time does Miller Driscoll start right now?
Well,
9 o'clock?
technically, our hours are 9:05 to 3:35. So we've been starting remote instruction at 9:15 because we have the partner teachers helping. So with our hybrid, so if I teach on-site Monday, Tuesday, and Mandy, you teach on-site Thursday, Friday, and we're partner teachers, you are helping me in the morning as the kids arrive, just so that we're getting the kids in, wash your hands, all that kind of stuff. I would then be with my on-site kids and you would go to your remote teaching space and you would start at 9:15. So we're doing right now 3:50 to 3:15 for that remote time.
So 9:15 to 3:15 is the current. So on days that your child is remote, it would be 9:15 to 1:15, but the in-class students would stay there through 3:35.
Yes, in class would be the 2 days that the kids are on site, that would be the same.
My only thought is there any way to make that even less? I mean, 9:15 to 1:15 still seems like a long amount of time for 4, 5, 6, 7-year-olds to sit in front of a screen. Is that I'm just curious where you came up with that. Is that the best? Is that optimal? Is that just because of scheduling?
Well, there are things in that 9:15 to 1:15 that break up that time. So it's not 4 hours straight of academics. So the kids do have a special in there, right? So they have a remote special with either art, music, library, or PE. They do have a snack break or a lunch break in there. So it does get broken up a bit. And again, I think the other thing that, like I said, will get easier over time is as I am teaching my class, I can do my small mini lesson, right? So I'm going to do my reading block. I can do my small mini lesson for Reader's Workshop. And then I can send kids off to do something, once everybody gets a little bit more proficient, first off with the text, second off with just the skill of, independent reading, for example, which is difficult for kindergarten, even when we're in school. but being able to send kids off to do something. So again, either I can meet with a small group, or again, it's sort of like, you don't have to look at the screen right now. So we're going to put you in the waiting room. You're going to go off, you're going to draw that picture of, you know, we did the show and tell unit first for kindergarten. You're going to draw a picture of your show and tell object that you brought. That's what we're going to do. So everybody's going to, like, you know, go off screen. You're going to go draw your picture. And then, you know, when you hear the chime or the music or whatever, then you're going to turn back on, you know, turn your video back on, and then we're going to share our pictures. So that balance is coming. It just, at the beginning of the year, there was a lot of screen time because, again, the teachers were getting to know the kids were getting to know each other. So, does that make sense?
But so you think that 9:15 to 1:15, I know we've gotten a ton of emails from families saying it's just too much screen time. You think that 9:15, 1:15 will take care of that?
I do. Again, and we have some ideas for how to break it up. So, and we're trying to say to teachers, listen, if you have to take a break, you take a break. If you need to have a movement break, you take a movement break. You know, I was in a second grade teacher's class where she has a whole board, and they, you know, the kids pick a certain spot on that board, and she clicked on it, and it was like, okay, here's what we're going to do. For 30 seconds, I'm going to set the timer for 30 seconds. We're all going to pretend we're race car drivers. And on the Zoom, we're all driving our race car or whatever. So they have a lot of tricks that they're using. And again, I think as we balance that, like I said, on screen, off screen, that it will be helpful.
Got it.
All right. So I guess I've definitely seen it a little bit living with a first grader, about how the more we're moving into core curriculum, I think the more manageable to some extent things are becoming. I would just kind of, you talked about doing some more synchronous, asynchronous split or time during the 9 to 1:15. I think the thing that I've been hearing a lot about the most and witnessing the most is that when sometimes there is a waiting room or a small room, the kids kind of just, at least they don't know what to do, or they're not kind of doing it. So it's becoming like a frustrating thing for them. And then it's hard for them to transition back into the work when that time is over.
Mm-hmm.
So finding maybe some, Click to Pop Junior, Bring Pop Junior, something that's a little bit maybe more animated, or something that, kind of connects the lessons, or I don't know, I'm not an educator, so whatever that may be, that's kind of some of the frustrations that we're kind of experiencing. And I think also it might be a little bit helpful. I know that we had like they're doing like the leveled reading, some of those kids in that school, to kind of have a tool that maybe helps us translate what like we just write books that are not the ones that are coming home from school, to help keep maybe them a little bit more, at least entertained for for the 3 days that they're home with that one kind of set of books,
Mm-hmm.
to help them keep going a little bit.
Yeah.
So
I just want everybody to understand that I'm recommending a change for right now, because there's a change we can make right now to give everybody some relief, is what I'm going to say. And then, I want the kids back in too. I think it's very hard, especially for kindergarten and first grade right now, to again, do all of these things. And like you said, Ruth, to be able to send, a little some of them are 4, 5, 6-year-old off to do something independently is very hard, because also what we teach kids when they're in school, if you don't know what to do, let's say Kevin doesn't know what to do, right? What do we say to Kevin? Look around. What are your friends doing, right? Well, their friends aren't there, right? They can't see that. So all these cues and all of these things that kids have, and that we, teach them to use as strategies, they don't have when they're sitting, at home, and again, it's no fault of anybody supporting them, the parents or the Y or whatever, but it's all it's very difficult and slowly but surely we build their independence when they're in school, but we do that through a variety of, strategies, and it's hard to utilize a lot of those strategies when you have a 5-year-old who is home by themselves, or not by themselves, but like, in the room without any other students. So right now, so all I'm saying is just right now, this is the change that I would really like to make. Again, just based on screen time, based on parent feedback, based on my staff's feedback, all of that. The next step is, I do think we need to look at getting, and I would like to start with kindergarten and first grade into the school for 4 days. I guess, we have to wait for the okay from Dr. Mackin. I think that's incredibly important, and everybody's health and safety and well-being is, that's obviously number one. But I think it would be really important to get our youngest learners back into the school. Like I said, I would recommend for the four days. So do the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, keeping the remote Wednesday. So that would be sort of my phase 2. And the date obviously would be determined by when Dr. Mackin feels as though, and Barry Bogle and Kevin and all of you feel as though it is safe to bring the kids back. I do think, like I said,
Kathy, really quickly, Kathy, why would you want that Wednesday remote, just out of curiosity?
I have been a proponent of keeping Wednesday a shortened day remote, because I think it's really important to keep everyone in the routine of remote learning, because I am worried that at any point in time, we could all go out full remote. And so I feel as though we still need to work on those strategies. We still need to keep everybody in that routine. We also, it is very helpful to have that day as a, deep cleaning for the custodians to be able to go through the building. So I just think that's really important, because I worry that if we took that day away and then 3 weeks down the road, it's like something happens, heaven forbid, something happens, and then we say, okay, now we have to be remote for 2 weeks. And then everybody goes, wait a minute, I know we did that before. How do we do that? Like what? So that's my thinking. So it's—
No, I get it. That's smart. Yep.
Okay. So again, our rationale for starting with K and 1 is, like we said, we think our youngest learners have the most difficulty accessing that remote instruction. We also think that when there are technical difficulties, and there have been technical difficulties, especially in first grade, Eric and his team were over today along with Fran. We're trying to figure out what's going on with first grade and with the Zoom. And so hopefully they'll get to the bottom of that. But it is really hard for young learners to pivot when there is a technical issue, because our teachers can't just say, okay, I'm going to type a little update to you in Schoology that says, I can't hear you and you can't hear me. So I'm going to post this assignment and here's what you're going to work on today. And then we'll get back on, either in a half an hour, we'll try again, or we'll get back on tomorrow, because a lot of our kids can't read. So that's a big piece. And I think it's also important to get the kids back in, because I do think that there's a heavy lift for parents and for caregivers to support this remote instruction. There would be changes to the classroom procedures. Obviously, we would have less than 6 feet of social distancing between the workstations. We would look at putting sneeze guards onto each of the desks. Right now, we only have them on the desks in the front of the classroom. And we would really have to look at modifying our arrival and our dismissal procedures, because right now we're in a good place, but we have half the school coming in, and we have a lot of parents dropping off, and we have 4 areas to do that. But we would definitely have to look at whether we would have to make some modifications to that as we, slowly but surely add more kids in. I want to—
Kathy, I hate to interrupt, but I'm looking at the time and it's already 8:30. So if I could summarize, it sounds like you are ready to go with the shortened remote days during the hybrid model, starting as soon as you can and aiming for Monday.
Yep.
And then you're proposing kind of a phased into 4 days on site, keeping Wednesdays remote. starting with kindergarten and first grade for a week, and then bringing the second graders in the next week. Am I right?
That would be the hope if everything goes the
Okay.
way we want it.
All right. So I think we have some time to mull over that piece of it, the phase in 4-day piece. But I sense your anxiety or your recommendation is fairly strong to shorten those remote days now that are hybrid. So I just wondered, Kevin, would that be a recommendation that you think we should act on tonight?
Absolutely. I think that it'd be my recommendation that the board, vote to adjust the length of the remote day for Miller Driscoll tonight.
Okay. Does everyone understand that?
Yep, I'm all for it.
Okay.
Kathy, I'm so glad you're there. I really am. We've known all the letters from parents are, 6-year-olds and 5-year-olds are not wired to sit in front of a screen for 6 hours, period. They're wired to play. And to expect that from them is just, it's crazy for us. So I am wholeheartedly in favor of your doing what you think you need to do to make it better for both parents, the kids, and your teachers. Absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to take that as a motion to adjust the shorten remote days for the hybrid model at Miller Driscoll starting Monday. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Mandy. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And Kathy, I think we hear your outline for, what to do down the road October 4th or October 5th, bringing kids in. And we're not leaving it. We just, we need to circle back because I also think we need to talk a little bit tonight about Cider Mill. So I am not trying to be rude. I'm just trying to be cognizant of the time.
I know I've talked too much. It's okay.
May
I just say one more thing though? Because I want to say one more thing about coming back, looking at bringing kids back 4 days. We do have to pivot on what we're doing with remote only students. Yeah. So we can talk about that at the next meeting. And we do have a plan for how we would do that. People need to understand, and I want to be very transparent, that if we bring children back in kindergarten and first grade, then we will have to make some, class placement changes and pivot how it is that we are instructing those remote only learners. And we'll talk about that when we meet again, because I want to give Jen time to talk, but sorry, but I just want that to be out there, that will be a part of it.
Okay.
Happy. One quick question about the sneeze guards. I know we've gotten a bunch of emails about the sneeze guards. Kevin, will those be in place for every student by October 5th?
I believe they will be. We just placed a second order for more than 1,000 of them for both Cider Mill and Driscoll.
Okay.
And the plexiglass, since that's another.
Yeah. So
the teacher, I don't know what the name of them is.
Well, they're these gigantic glass 6-foot shields. They were delivered on Tuesday, and our maintenance crew has been assembling them. So the high school, the whole set was just sent to the high school this morning, and they're here. They're just being assembled and distributed, but they're on the premises.
Okay, good. All right, so can we at least scratch the surface with Cider Mill? Oh, I'm sorry, Jen.
I just want to ask one quick question. Kathy, you're talking about October 5th about bringing back kindergarten and first grade. Are we, in the next 2 weeks, when we're thinking about all this planning and how to get that done, is there any way that we can also consider bringing back second grade at the same time?
Yeah, well, let's absolutely, we hear her outline. So why don't we think of our questions and our concerns and our suggestions, so when we circle back for our next meeting, which should be sooner than later, that point can get addressed.
Okay.
Is that all right? Yeah, don't want to lose it. That's why we can't decide that tonight. We just need more time to kind of think about that and think it through. Okay, so Cider Mill, Jen?
All right, so first I just want to thank my staff. They've been unbelievable, and they're amazing, and so hardworking and collaborative, and really have just been on board with everything that has kind of come their way, and just with such a positive spirit. And grateful is just the best word. Every day, just grateful for this group of unbelievable colleagues I get to work with every day. So I also want to really thank the board and Christy Mackin and Kevin for having Christy Mackin there today. I think that was really helpful for all of us to hear her really talk about the data, and it was very affirming to hear data really talked about for the first time at the board meeting. It's definitely affirming to hear that that's really at the root of all of the decision making. So that's very comforting, because at the heart of all of this, we all want our kids back, and it's scary, right? We want to be able to take care of the people who are in our buildings, the students and the staff. And so at the heart of any of the decision making and the worry and all of the hard work and decisions is because we care about the people and the students that are in our building. And so it was nice to hear that really even the smallest bit of change in the numbers are impacting decisions. And so I know that that probably made staff in my building feel good. So thank you. What I want to do is try to paint a picture of what school looks like right now in the hybrid model, and then what it would look like if we were 100% in. You know, I think that each building has a little bit of different logistics, and I think that it's important to have a full picture. I did send the surveys out today. A lot has happened for me in the last 48 hours, I will be honest. You know, I didn't really have a full understanding of the timeline. There was a lot of talk about kindergarten reopening. I was not aware that we were opening possibly on the 29th and now on the 5th. So that was a complete surprise to me up until when Kevin was the lucky winner and had to make sure I was seated. You know, I had thought the board was going to be checking in. So there's been a lot of catching up that I've had to do with my staff, and that's why I had to send a parent survey out tonight and trying to catch up and get some feedback and some information now to make the best decisions. So with that, I thought I would do my best to really kind of paint a picture. And I think it's really important because I know it's really easy to say we just want our kids back in school, right? And I think that, you know, that must be a really easy thing to say. And I think school doesn't look like what it used to look like. It's really hard to see school right now. It's amazing because even sitting at the desk, you could hear kids, and you know, there's nothing like having the children back in our buildings. I mean, it was depressing, right? Not having kids. Kids are supposed to be in schools, but it's really hard. We have sneeze guards on our desks. Kids are not allowed to be in groups. We're not supposed to be having group learning activities. We can't share paper. We can't share materials. Even when we're in class, we can't have small groups. It has to be through Zoom. You know, even when we are in school learning has to happen through the platforms of Schoology and Zoom and what have you, with earphones and everything. Because you can't all the tables have been taken out of our rooms so that we can have the space. And because you just can't cluster around a table to have small group instruction. So there's a lot that just in this very temporary moment in time of what is so wonderful about school that just doesn't exist. And so I think that's really important to remember. And this goes for whether we are in the hybrid model, the 100% full in. I mean, this is just what school is like right now. And so there is really no perfect answer. And so, you know, right now we're in the hybrid model, and we've done, as a school, I think, a lot of really hard work to make the hybrid model work for us. And I did poll and get preliminary results from our staff and from our parents. And so I can share with you where we are right now. 82% of our staff would prefer to remain in the hybrid model for the remainder of the trimester. For our families, 26% would rather remain in either the remote or the hybrid, while 74% would rather be in person. So big difference between the staff and the parents at this moment in time. You know, and I think that the important thing is, and Kathy talked to a little bit of this, is that as with any model or anytime you're starting something, we've just started. Each student has only been in or out, depending on whichever way you want to look at it, 3 days. And during those days, those were our orientation days, right? We haven't really been given the opportunity to see what works, what doesn't work, and already we're being asked to transition to something new. And, you know, that part of it would make me, I feel like that would be unfortunate because we haven't had a chance to really make something work where we would have to get used to something different again. You know, if we, some of the pros is that the teams are working really well as teams, and they're really forming together to be able to work in different content areas. It's also good continuity for when people are going to be absent in the next, you know, upcoming, you know, months, as I'm sure people will be absent as different people have to quarantine, as we've seen in different communities around us. People are going to be in and out. And what it does is it creates continuity for our students when different staff members might be out. And so the teaming approach, that was why we really wanted to have this level of teaming. So there are a lot of benefits, you know, I'm not going to go back just because of the time, to all of the different reasons we wanted to really rely on the teamed approach. So we did ask for kind of what were the 3 big barriers that parents were seeing. I obviously did not have time to even look into that data, but our hope was to, you know, start to get feedback from our parents once we started to get heavy into the curricular parts of it, which is going to be in the next week here. We also have a plan, just like Kathy, and the first phase of the plan would have been over the next week. Phase 1 would have been really to prioritize looking at our hybrid model, and as we move heavy into, you know, kind of week 2 of our curriculum units, is to really look at the balance of screen time and to figure out kind of what can we do to make sure that our students are engaged in meaningful work, but make sure that they're not on screens the entire time. And so our coaches have already started to work with our content area lead teachers and started to play around with what that would look like in the different content areas. And so those conversations will be going on into the next week. So, you know, if we have the opportunity, you know, I know that ultimately it'll be the board's decision and it'll be the recommendation, you know, with input from all of us, but we would like the opportunity to explore the possibility of looking at extending our time in the hybrid model, just to have the opportunity to make this work. I'm going to go into what it would look like. We have planned out phase 2 and phase 3 for if we go full in, and I want to talk through some of the logistics and some of the pros and some of the cons of what that model would look like. I mean, there's going to be pros and cons to everything that we do. So let me just kind of stop there for phase one, which kind of focuses on the hybrid, and see if there's anything that you guys want me to clarify. I'm trying to go quick just because I know time is a little bit rushed here.
Jen, like to talk about the student experience, because we know we've heard, quite a lot from, families of our youngest folks. We really haven't heard a whole bunch from Cider Mill, and the general impression is, kids.
Yeah. Honestly, until the survey went out from Miller Driscoll on Friday, which obviously prompted, we didn't, Cider Mill didn't get a survey. I think I maybe had like 3-4 maybe emails tops. So although technology wise, there were definitely struggles. So I'm not saying there weren't tech struggles. We really weren't getting that many kind of like our world is falling apart. We can't navigate this. Obviously, I've gotten a lot more since Miller Driscoll is considering going back full time, just because that's just the nature. I mean, I think I understand that, right? So I think that there is definitely a feeling that it's easier to be in school. And, I want to talk through that a little bit and talk about what the in-school experience is like. But, I think that as we get better at it and as we become more routined with it, I think that everything will settle in a bit. I feel like we haven't even had the chance to find that routine. And that's one of the concerning things to me, is that, and Kevin, you've had to hear me. I was like, wait, what? Like, what happened here? We haven't even had a chance to find a groove, and like, how are we like changing already? So.
Okay. Can I just interrupt for a second?
Yeah.
I just, after, I don't want to leave anything as urgent and timely as Kathy had in terms of changing the current hybrid model and just tweaking it. She needed to shorten the remote days. Is there anything that we would need, or you would recommend that we would do tonight in that sort of like vein that we need to get through? Okay, I just didn't want to,
No, thank you.
Opportunity. All right, and then in terms of, we have a sense of what Kathy's plan for Miller Driscoll would be, and you can take us through just the highlights of what your plan would be. But given the lateness of the hour, and the fact that we, have already said we're probably going to need another meeting, it just seems like we do, which is fine because this is important stuff. I'm just wondering if you could give us a brief summary.
Sure.
And then from both of you and or Kevin, if the board could see a description of what you would envision full in would look like, and your ideal way of doing it, so that the board members can come back with questions, concerns, and comments, based on your full thinking. So if you wanted to spend a couple of minutes tonight just giving us a really rough overview. We've heard you want to stay in hybrid until the trimester. We understand that's your desire A. Could you just give us a sense of, if it were to be full in, like you heard Kathy, she wants, certain groups coming in, she wants to keep Wednesday.
Yep.
What would your vision be?
Okay.
Just minutes, and then we'll just, again, we'd like some written kind of description from you guys so we can mull it over and send you our questions and reactions.
Yep. All right. So basically, I was going basically on the dates that Kevin had shared with us yesterday, and that was, so the 5th, I'm recommending that would be just 3rd grade, and I'm going to go over why with the logistics below. And that would be keeping with the same pattern. It would be Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, full day, and then Wednesday being the remote early release day. So that would be starting with just third grade on the 5th. And then it would be third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, starting the 13th.
October 13th.
Of October, yeah. All right, so the reasons why, all of the different considerations that need to be addressed, and thus my recommendation for the timeline would be, there would be a need to reorganize many of our class lists and to reassign teachers. This would have to happen due to the revised student participation. So, and again, I won't know all of that until I get the response of actually who is in the building. It will impact greatly as to, because our rooms are so tight, who is going to be in each of those classrooms. The idea, and I think this is what Kathy was trying to get to, is that we would have to pull off remote teachers. And I know that that's one of the things Kathy was trying to say at the end of her meeting. We would be pulling off remote teachers and have to reallocate those students to existing classes because there's just no way that you could possibly teach mostly full classes and then also teach a few students at home. And so that is something where, you know, we've spent these first couple weeks building community, and now we are having to reorganize, and you know, it's just a challenge. So that's one of the things that we would need to be doing. We'd have to reassign some staff to remote.
Jen, I'm sorry to you know, I think, you know, what we really wanted was just the summary. And so you would also recommend phasing in grade levels. You would recommend keeping Wednesday basically as is.
Yep.
And then, you know, both of you have noted that addressing remote learners only is an issue. And then of course you're going to struggle to find the space, et cetera. So that's the kind of thing that the sooner you and Kathy and through Kevin, it would help us to just get some of those details in writing on paper for us. And so then when we come back at our next meeting, whether it's next Monday or Tuesday, we'll be able to, you'll already, you know, sort of have our set of questions and you'll have sort of your details. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I have it written down here. So.
Yeah, okay, all right. So again, I just kind of wanted the top level, you know, vision. And so we know your choice A is hybrid until the first trimester. And if you were to bring everyone in, you would want to do it grade 3 1 week, and then grade 4 and 5 the next week, and 4 days, and keep Wednesdays as is.
Yeah.
And then you need to explain to us all the reallocation and the reassigning and all of that, which I wish we had time for tonight, but we just don't.
Yeah, and I guess hybrid for now, and I guess my understanding of this check-in was that it was a check-in, and like if the number stayed low, was that then, you know, we would then move to.
Yeah, exactly. That's what the board had discussed. And I know it seems like years ago, and it wasn't, it was only weeks ago. But when we had set our goals, we had said that, you know, we would review the learning model, assuming that we were going to start, you know, August 31st, which we did. And we would set 3 weeks and just to review, but with an eye, we always said, with an eye towards getting to full open. We have said that in our goals. And we even mentioned that it would probably, based on what we knew about younger children versus older children, that we would probably happen at the K-5 level first. Again, we didn't set any date to do it other than the date of the review, but our goal of getting to full open has been there for a while.
Right, and so like I said, I would like to have more reviews. So I don't mean to say that it would have to be till the end of December. So I would hope to still have check-in points.
Well, we're going to stick with the 3-week cycles. I mean, that's
Yeah, exactly. So just when Debbie was saying I would stay here till the end, I wouldn't necessarily want that.
Oh, I see. Okay, I got it. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Debbie,
All right, so, but you don't need any action tonight the way Kathy wanted something. Okay, great. All right, so we will schedule another meeting and complete the bigger picture of moving forward based on Kathy's outline and based on Jen's outline. And we will absolutely discuss it, question it, review it, listen to Kevin's take. Obviously, we always engage with parents and families and the medical experts as well. Okay. I'm sorry for everybody, or not really, because it just takes the time it takes, but it's already 10 to 9. I have postponed public comments already, and I need to honor that. So I'm going to ask Maria and Kevin, do you mind if we postpone the other action items until our next meeting?
We can postpone both. Yeah, we have the teacher evaluation support plan and then some staffing proposal. That's fine. We can push that off till next week.
Okay, and we have a regularly scheduled meeting on Thursday, which we will keep next Thursday, but I am anticipating we will need another meeting before that, either Monday or Tuesday. And Kevin and I and the board members will try to find a convenient date and time that work, because we really need to get this, get this timeline out there in terms of the K-5 level. We need to come to, just complete this conversation that we couldn't complete tonight. But we do have a sense of what the issues are. We do have a sense of what your basic outline would be. And then we need to see the details, and then we need to come back and discuss them all, and then make a final record, and then hear Kevin's final recommendations and see how we feel about those.
Deb, I just wanted to bring up one quick point. So tonight we're closing with no decisions except for the Miller Driscoll shortened remote days. But I think it's important that we say that we're following science and data, and we just had the physician on with the hope and the assumption that October 5th, we're opening our schools K through 5. That's our hope and assumption as of tonight.
Okay, yeah, again, what that looks like, Mandy, and we haven't decided that. But yes, October 5th is the magic number to start bringing, or magic date, to start bringing more kids on site. And again, we have to look at the phase-in model versus something else. And that's why we need to see what they have to, see the details and then ask our questions and, give our thoughts.
Right, I just don't want anyone to be surprised.
Okay, got it. No, October 5th is an important date. All right, so can we move, since we postponed the other action items, we talked about needing a meeting in addition to September 24th and before September 24th. We can get into comments from the public. Given the lateness of the hour, we're happy to do public comment, but we have to be very kind of strict about the 2-minute limit and try to maintain the 15-minute limit per topic. So I think, Kevin, had you asked Lucille to try to organize it that way?
Try to organize by topic and just be mindful of adhering to our guidelines for public comment. So, limiting 2 minutes to each public comment and then 15 minutes per topic.
Okay. Do you know how many topics we had?
I don't. Lucille?
Okay. Well, I organized them by community and then by staff. And that I didn't go further as by topic. I only separated them that way.
Okay. My guess is the topic is it's going to be pretty much on the same thing, which is about reopening. And I think most of them, if not all of them, were K-5.
Yep. There's 14 from the community comments, and there's 15 comments from teachers.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, and they're all about reopening. Am I right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So, all right, we are going to limit this just because the lateness of the hour, and we can carry some of them over. But why don't we alternate between community and staff? And we will listen to 15 to or so minutes because it's all about the same topic. And no comment can go longer than 2 minutes. Is that okay, Lucille?
I'm sorry?
Toggle between one comment from a community member, one comment from a staff member. Go back and forth.
Okay.
But it's all on the same topic. So we're going to limit public comment to around 15 minutes and hear half of them from the community, half of it from staff if you could just
And
alternate.
they all are posted to board docs.
Yep.
Okay, first public comment from Kim Lupino, 18 Surrey Glen, Wilton, Connecticut, to the Board of Ed. I'm sorry. Okay. To the Board of Education, I would like to first start off by saying thank you to all the teachers and staff that have been working diligently to get ready for school and remote learning. I know this is not ideal times for any of us. I write as a concerned parent with a young kindergartner and a first grader. I believe there needs to be a public discussion consideration for all our children to return to school full time or at least half days remote. Having these little growing minds behind a computer screen for 3 out of 5 days of learning is not healthy. It is not healthy for their minds or social skills. There has been extensive research that shows children's screen time should be limited to less than 2 hours a day. I urge you all to sit in on one kindergarten Zoom and try to tell me that this is okay. My son's classmate almost cut her hair off during the Zoom the other day, and the children were terrified. I do understand that some of this anxiety in children would happen whether they were remote or not. However, the idea that they need to stare at a screen for 4 hours a day on top of that cannot be any way for a child's mind to grow. My 5-year-old dreads getting on his computer. He does not dread school yet. I understand there is a survey going out to parents this week. I'm hopeful those will shed light on the problem here. Our teachers have been nothing short of wonderful. They're keeping on a happy face in the time of such uncertainties. Nevertheless, someone needs to be the voice for our children, and that is us. Thank you for your time. Sincerely, Kim Lupino.
Okay, thank you.
Public comment, Andrew Nixaji, from WEA Executive Board members, Andrew Nixaji, Lisa Hibbard, Peggy Muir, Michelle Marr, Kelly Holtz, Jennifer Kaminsky, and Terry Ellis. The WEA is opposed to the proposed plan to bring all students back into Miller Driscoll and Cider Mill schools on September 29th and October 5th, respectively. Given that there have only been 6 days of hybrid learning, there has not been sufficient opportunity to appropriately gauge the effectiveness of the health and safety measures in place at each of the schools. There have been 2 confirmed cases of COVID-19 at Wilton High School, and surrounding communities such as Darien, Greenwich, Norwalk, Stanford, and Weston are also being impacted by new cases. Among other concerns, this proposal would necessitate the reduction in social distancing between students from 6 feet to 3 feet, which is not in compliance with the CDC guidelines. It would be irresponsible of this board to risk the health and safety of our youngest learners by bringing them all back in the building on September 29th. The WEA supports maintaining the status quo provided there are no new cases in our schools for at least another 3 weeks.
Okay, thank you.
The next message is from Meredith Marks, Wilton resident. As a mother of a 1st and 3rd grader in Wilton Public Schools, I have major concerns with the current e-learning schedule. My 1st grader struggled with staying engaged in the Zoom call for a half day, and it took most of my time to help her this past week. A full day is out of the question in this current model. Also, many technical issues with the Chromebook and Schoology. Best regards, Meredith Marks.
Okay, thank you.
The next is Kimberly Cameron. Dear members, Wilton PS staff member. Dear members of the Wilton Board of Education, I am writing to encourage you to open the schools for in-class learning for all students. At Cider Mill specifically, the students are struggling with the current hybrid model. When making your decision about allowing full access to schools, the most important question to consider is, does this hybrid model deliver effective learning to all students? The absence of daily physical proximity to a teacher who can provide necessary instruction is obviously one key downfall to the hybrid model. But the continued technology issues and the need for teachers to manage 2 cohorts of students synchronously further inhibit productive learning for our students. There are constant technology problems. It is difficult, albeit nearly impossible, to hear at-home students during Zoom. The students' screens freeze or their voices are often unintelligible. Often the Zoom will disappear or students will be kicked off. Teachers are spending too much time eliciting responses from at-home students or troubleshooting with them to better understand their technology issues. With so much time and energy devoted to basic student communication, learning for both in-school and at-home students is placed on hold. Most of the day is spent troubleshooting technology, managing behavior, and showing students how to manipulate Schoology. Unfortunately, this hybrid model interferes with every student's ability to learn effectively. I urge you to consider the educational needs of our students. It is critical that students are allowed to come back to school full-time so that they can take advantage of the level of instruction commensurate with Wilton's well-respected and renowned academic standards. Thank you for giving this issue your serious attention. Kimberly Cameron, French teacher, world language, IL, Cider Mill School.
Okay, thank you.
The next one is from William Maxwell, 27 Cherry Lane, Wilton. We ask that you consider the needs of Miller Driscoll students and fully reopen the school. The hybrid model does not provide what our youngest learners need: full-time, in-person instruction from our talented educators. It is possible to do this safely with no more risk than we are currently taking in the hybrid model. We have enough feedback from our children to know that remote learning in Miller Driscoll is not the best plan for them. The remote learning days feel unbearably long and the screen time is intense. Conducting first grade on Zoom has seemingly eliminated the subtleties of teaching and connecting with young children. Despite the enormous efforts of Miller Driscoll teachers, despite the enormous efforts from the Miller Driscoll teachers, experimenting with multiple new technologies places a burden on the children, parents, and teachers to figure it out as we go. After missing so much instruction in the spring, we have no time to waste with an ineffective strategy. A better way forward is a full week of in-school learning, making adjustments to prevent the spread of SARS-CoV-2. Other public and private elementary schools are fully open. Summer camps, sports practices, and daycares are safely operating. Simple measures consistently applied have time and time again proven to stop this virus. It is time to stop living in fear. Our elementary age children deserve to experience more than remote learning can offer.
Okay, it seems like everyone has written their statements in exactly 2 minutes. Sorry. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yep.
Dear Dr. Smith and the Board of Education, the district has repeatedly stated that safety for everyone is the most important thing. I am part of the everyone. I am a teacher and I am wary of how serious safety is considered by the district. By no means do the current low COVID numbers mean we are out of the woods. The hybrid model the district adopted is not a perfect plan, but it is providing us a safer learning and working environment. However, it's only been in place for a week and a half. This is not enough time to prove that it is safe to return to school in large numbers. I understand that the BOE looks at data and consults with the state and health department prior to making decisions, but you must also remember to listen to those of us on the front line. Sending Wilton students back 100% under the current proposed plan sacrifices the safety of everyone. What is the rush? How is it okay to put us all in an unnecessary and unsafe situation? We should be grateful for the low COVID numbers and allow more time to pass, proving that indeed it is safe to be back at 100%. Can you name one other organization or business that is back at full capacity? While there have been various technical issues in the district and community, overall, we have been successfully building positive relationships with the students. The challenge with technology is not a logical reason for putting all of our safety in jeopardy. We are living in a pandemic after all. Life and work are not meant to be as they have always been. Adding more children to our classrooms and schools will be more restrictive, and there simply won't be space to social distance safely. I understand the desire for students to return to our buildings full-time. As a teacher, I would love to have all of my students back here with me every day, but at what cost would that come? I already feel my safety is being put at risk on a daily basis in our current model. Bringing all students back would increase that risk. Prove that the health and safety of Wilton.
Okay, I'm sorry, Lucille, that is 2 minutes.
Okay, that was from Susanna Carlin, the supplemental teacher. Kelly Chappelle, My son is in first grade and has a learning disability. He spends most of his time at home learning, at most of his at-home learning days crying, frustrated, and feeling bad about himself. His father and I have adjusted out of work schedules so that one of us is with him for each remote learning day. However, we are not teachers and we don't know how to help him. We have had conferences with the school and they are trying so hard to help, but he just needs to be in class. Please consider how behind the first graders already are and bring back full-time school for at least K through 2. Thanks, Kelly Chapel.
Okay, thank you.
Dear Wilton Board of Education members, this is, from Michelle Montanaro, art teacher, Cider Mill. Dear Wilton Board of Education members, I am writing to you in regards to the shocking news that we were given yesterday that Cider Mill will be open full-time on September 29th. I am going on my 5th year at Cider Mill and my 15th year as an educator in Connecticut. I have always supported the BOE decisions and speak very highly of the district I work in and thought the district had our best intentions in mind. With this being said, I was shocked to find that after 6 in-school days, the BOE has decided that we go back full-time. I do not feel that we have given the hybrid model enough time to truly be effective. Our students have just begun to start this new normal in school, which they are struggling with. Students are being asked to sit in the chairs for 7+ hours a day with masks on, all while social distancing from their peers. Sure, this looks ideal, but in reality, this is not what is happening. Students are trying to share materials. They are visiting each other's desks. They do not wear their mask properly sometimes at all. This is just some of my concerns as an educator with only half the class in the room. How will we as educators continue to police these behaviors with a full class? Not only are students not social distancing, but the teachers do not have the correct PPE to go into these classrooms. As a special area teacher that is mixed into all of the cohorts in my building, I am in contact with over 300 students in a week on both sides of the building. We do not have plexi on our desks or on our carts. We were promised basic PPE modifications weeks ago and it's still not in our classrooms, yet our staff has still shown up here to be here for our students. Where is the support for your staff? All we have is flimsy sneeze barriers on the front row desks that fall and are rarely standing by the end of a class. As a community, we are all nervous to come back.
Lucille, I'm sorry, but that's reached the 2-minute limit, but thank you.
Okay. Sean Conley, I don't have an address, Wilton resident. All the time is now for our children to return to school full-time. For those that are uncomfortable, they have the option to remain virtual, but the majority are suffering for the few. The science supports our return to full-time and the excellent precautions that are in place through your hard work will further protect our children in their return. Thank you, Sean Conley.
Thank you.
To the Board of Education, I am a school counselor at Cider Mill. I have been so happy to see the students back at our school in the past few weeks. I would love for all of our students to return to school as I know that, I'm sorry, this message is cut off. I'm gonna have to read a different one.
Okay.
Dr. Smith and members of the Board of Education, I have been very grateful for the kindness and consideration that you have displayed during this global pandemic. I felt that you heard us and did what was best for all students and staff in Wilton, Connecticut. A speech was given from you just a few weeks ago that was genuinely heartfelt. However, this afternoon I began to feel perhaps we aren't being heard. That was when I heard that we may go from a hybrid model that we have all worked tirelessly to implement for success to a full in-person class. Wilton stands for commitment and strives to be a community of kindness and that has respect towards others. After reading the article in Good Morning Wilton this afternoon, I had no words. Why are you choosing to put the staff, especially those who are expecting a child or have diseases which compromise their immune system, at risk? What will be done to protect them? I began to think about what the responsible decision would be. I would understand a date of October 29th to see if it is safe to return to the classrooms for all. I do not understand the date of September 29th. Even October 5th is too soon. I am asking for you to rethink this decision and continue to be committed to supporting a community of learners with kindness, understanding, and to keep everyone, students and staff, safe. Jean Yates, Cider Mill.
Okay, thank you.
Dear members of the Wilton Board of Education and Dr. Smith, please listen to state, federal, and medical guidance that says it is safe to send our children back to full-time in-person school. Please do not let fear guide your decisions. Nicole DiNapoli, Wilton resident.
Okay, thank you.
Dear members of the board, I write this letter of concern after hearing of the possibility of a full in-person return of all students to my school building on September 29th. Over the past 2 weeks, school weeks, we have met with students in the hybrid model with half of the student body represented in our schools. As a special area teacher, I have had the opportunity to visit 15 separate classrooms with a maximum of 12 students in each. While it has been so wonderful to see those students in person, and there is no disputing the value of in-person instruction, there have been a large number of alarming things that have come to my attention. Student stations that are originally placed 6 feet apart move throughout the day. This is unavoidable because kids in my school are young. They inadvertently push desks back and forth. Keeping the 6-foot distance a constant is a struggle. Young students have been having an extremely hard time keeping masks in place while in the classroom. They slide down. Many of them remove masks at a whim, and we are repeatedly reminding them to replace masks. Foldable plastic shields that are on desks, at the moment we only have 5 per classroom, as sneeze guards, constantly fall down, and students have to replace them over and over again. We have been in person with students for 6 days, and plexiglass shields for teacher stations are still not in our school or in place. Students are unable to maintain distance while walking in the hallway. Students are unable to remain seated and get up to visit with a friend in the classroom, understandably because they are being asked to stay in one spot for such a long period of time each day. There is no outside air circulation. No windows have been opened in any room that I have entered. Safety measures are not working at this young age level with numbers of students in half. It concerns me that the board would think that we would be able to maintain safety measures with even more students in the building.
Okay, Lucille, I'm sorry, that one has reached the limit.
Okay.
And I'm looking at our 15-minute total limit, so we have time for one more.
Okay. This is from Yvonne Felden. Dear members of the Wilton Board of Education and Dr. Smith, please act on federal, state, and medical guidance that says it is safe to send our children back to school in person full-time. Wilton families and children need and should be given this option. Respectfully and with thanks, Yvonne and Jay Felden.
Okay, could we also hear one more community member? Because that one was a little short.
Okay. As a student of Wilton High School, and do you want a student? I have a student. I have community members.
I was just going to take a community member. We just have another minute. So,
Okay.
and then, you know, if we can always read them at the next meeting if there's time. So go ahead.
Jen Patterson. This is from Jen Patterson, 116 Danbury Road. To the BOE meeting panel, on behalf of the school employees, I respectfully ask that the BOE spend a full day in a full classroom of children at Miller Driscoll School on a rainy indoor recess day. That will demonstrate you feel it is safe for teachers and school employees. With all due respect to the board, meeting remotely as you have been is bad optics. Use leadership and action and show staff across the district that you are comfortable with being in a full room of students, especially on rainy days. Visit several classrooms in that day and spend more than 30 minutes in each room. The same goes for all central office administrators. Spend a day in their shoes. You can wear the same PPE given to staff. A single layer, one size fits. Some cloth mask and one open bottomed face shield. If you decide to observe for several days, you will need to wash the mask each evening as there is only one provided per person. Sincerely, Jen Patterson, Danbury Road, Wilton.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to 15 minutes all about reopening. Thank you, Lucille, for reading them. We could perhaps, all of them will be part of the record of this meeting. I don't see anything else on the agenda tonight. I want to thank everybody for attending the long meeting, but obviously critically important meeting. So thank you, and we will have another meeting either Monday or Tuesday, and then we will also hold our regularly scheduled Board of Ed meeting next Thursday. So with that, I say good night and thank you, and this meeting is adjourned.
Good night, Deborah.
Good night.
Good night, all.
Yeah. Good night,
Good
everybody.
night.
Right.